Welcome, the Lord's chosen. The people who shape outcomes rarely announce themselves, and they almost never explain why they're watching you. That sentence alone makes most people uncomfortable, because it points to a reality we're not taught to notice. Influence doesn't usually arrive with applause, titles, or dramatic entrances. It arrives quietly, already formed, already decided, often long before you're aware you've been evaluated. And if you've ever felt like certain doors opened without effort, or certain people treated you with an unusual level of seriousness you didn't ask for, this isn't coincidence. It's pattern recognition at work. Here's a fact most people never hear. In high-influence circles, respect is rarely verbalized publicly. It's tracked privately. People with real leverage don't broadcast approval. They observe, test, and remember. They don't compliment often because compliments are cheap currency. What they do instead is note consistency, restraint, and how someone behaves when there's nothing obvious to gain. In other words, they don't look for charisma. They look for structure. And this is where things get interesting and slightly uncomfortable. Because the kind of respect we're talking about here doesn't come from being impressive in the usual ways. It comes from being different in ways that are hard to explain and even harder to imitate. It's why the loudest person in the room is rarely the most influential, and why the person being quietly observed often has no idea they're being measured at all. Somewhere, someone with real power has already formed an opinion about you and hasn't felt the need to tell you. There's also a strange irony to it all. The very traits that earn this level of respect are usually the ones that get overlooked, misunderstood, or even joked about by everyone else. You're too calm, too private, too serious, or hard to read. Meanwhile, the people who actually matter are thinking, good. This one isn't performing. That's when the quiet nods happen. That's when invitations appear without explanations. That's when conversations shift tone around you. And yes, there's a little humor in this, because while you're busy living your life, probably wondering why you don't quite fit the usual molds, a small group of very important people are essentially saying, don't tell them yet, just watch. Not exactly the plot twist most self-help books prepare you for. What you're about to hear isn't flattery, motivation, or mythology. It's a rare look into how influence actually recognizes its own, and what a certain group of highly influential people have already concluded about you without ever saying it out loud. Number 1, you are not impressive in the obvious ways, and that's exactly why we trust you. You don't walk into rooms trying to win them. You don't lead with stories, titles, or exaggerated confidence. There's nothing polished or performative about how you present yourself, and that's what quietly sets you apart. Most people believe respect is earned by being seen. You seem to understand instinctively that real respect is earned by being consistent when no one is watching. That difference doesn't go unnoticed by people who've seen too many performances to be impressed by them. Those in influential positions are constantly surrounded by individuals trying to prove something. Everyone wants approval, access, or advantage. You don't. You speak when there's something worth saying and stay silent when there isn't, not out of strategy, but because you're not hungry for validation. That lack of hunger signals security, and security in a world full of neediness is disarming. What's striking is how you handle attention when it does come your way. You don't expand to fill it. You don't suddenly become louder or more animated. You remain the same person before and after the spotlight briefly lands on you. That consistency tells experienced observers that you're not acting. You're not adjusting yourself based on the audience. You already know who you are, which means you're harder to manipulate and less likely to collapse under pressure. You also don't rush to demonstrate competence. You let your understanding reveal itself naturally, sometimes later than expected, sometimes when it actually matters. People who've been around long enough know that Rushed intelligence is often insecurity in disguise. Quiet competence, on the other hand, tends to be real. It's built, not borrowed. There's also restraint in how you speak about yourself. You don't exaggerate your struggles or decorate your successes. You don't need sympathy or applause to feel legitimate. That restraint reads as honesty. It tells those watching that if you do speak up, it won't be empty. In a culture obsessed with being impressive, your refusal to perform feels almost rebellious. And to people who've seen how fragile most egos are, that calm refusal signals something rare. Depth. Not the kind that needs to be advertised, but the kind that holds steady under scrutiny. That's why trust forms around you without discussion. You don't demand it. You quietly earn it. Number 2. You understand power without craving it. You don't chase control, titles, or the need to be in charge, and that's exactly why power seems comfortable around you. You're not trying to dominate conversations or steer outcomes just to feel important. Instead, you pay attention. You notice who influences decisions, how momentum shifts, and when silence matters more than speech. That awareness isn't learned from books or slogans. It comes from watching people long enough to understand what actually moves them. People who crave power usually reveal themselves quickly. They push too hard, talk too much, and react emotionally when things don't go their way. You don't do that. You let situations unfold before stepping in, and when you do, it's subtle. A comment here, a pause there, a choice not to react. Those small moves often change the direction of things more than loud authority ever could. Experienced people recognize that kind of control immediately. What makes this different is that you don't seem attached to the outcome in a desperate way. You're willing to walk away, to let others take the spotlight, to not win every exchange. That willingness removes leverage from anyone trying to pressure or manipulate you. When someone has nothing to threaten, power loses its grip. That calm independence reads as strength. You also don't confuse power with ego. You understand that real influence isn't about being feared or admired. It's about being trusted to remain steady when things get complicated. You don't weaponize information or exploit weaknesses, even when you could. That restraint tells people you're safe to work with, not because you're harmless, but because you're principled. There's a quiet confidence in how you handle hierarchy. You don't shrink around authority, and you don't inflate yourself around those with less status. You treat everyone with the same grounded presence. That balance shows you're not impressed by symbols. You understand that power shifts, titles expire, and only character carries forward. Those who've spent years navigating influence can spot this instantly. They know the difference between someone who wants power and someone who understands it. One creates chaos the moment they get it. The other stabilizes everything they touch. You fall into the second category, and that's why people with real leverage keep an eye on you. Not because you're trying to rise, but because you already know how not to fall. Number 3, you don't mirror us, and that unsettles us in a good way. Most people spend their lives adjusting themselves to fit the room. They laugh at the jokes they don't find funny, nod at ideas they don't understand, and adopt the energy of whoever dominates the space. You don't do that. You move through environments with a quiet authenticity that doesn't bend to expectation. You respond to situations based on your own understanding, not on what you think others want to see. That refusal to perform makes people uncomfortable at first, because it disrupts the patterns they've grown used to. But it also draws deep respect, because it signals integrity in a world built on imitation. Influential people notice this immediately. They see who bends, who yields, who mirrors to survive, and who remains unshaken. Your independence signals something rare. You are not easily influenced, nor are you predictably loyal to convenience. That unpredictability isn't a threat, it's a marker of trustworthiness. You can't be bribed, charmed, or flattered into behaving against your principles because you operate on your own axis. Those who understand influence instinctively recognize the value in that. It's not about being obstinate or stubborn. You're flexible when necessary, but flexibility doesn't mean compromise of identity. You listen without surrendering your perspective. You observe without imitating. You engage without performing. That alone sets you apart in every room you enter. People who've spent years learning how to read motives and predict actions suddenly find themselves second-guessing. They realize your decisions aren't easy to anticipate, and that's a rare form of power. What's even more compelling is that your lack of mirroring doesn't create distance, it creates presence. Others may flail to understand your behavior, but they also feel its weight. They sense someone who is consistently themselves, who doesn't require approval, and who won't dilute their standards. That is the kind of presence that shapes conversations, decisions, and perceptions without ever demanding attention. And in a world where most influence is performative, your quiet authenticity doesn't just stand out, it commands it. Number 4. You see systems where others see personalities. Most people get caught up in individuals, their moods, their whims, their loud opinions. They respond to the chaos of human behavior as if it's random, reacting to every flare-up, every slight, every moment of drama. You don't. You see patterns. You notice the invisible structures that guide people's choices, the unspoken rules that shape interactions, and the incentives that quietly drive behavior. While others are busy judging or reacting, you're observing and mapping. That ability isn't flashy. It doesn't draw applause, but it's a kind of intelligence that commands quiet, serious respect. People with real influence immediately recognize it. They've spent years trying to predict outcomes, figuring out who will falter, who will adapt, and who will collapse under pressure. When they meet someone who isn't focused on personalities, but on the underlying systems, they see someone who thinks strategically, someone whose decisions are guided by insight rather than ego. You understand cause and effect in social dynamics the way a chess player understands the board, not by looking at the pieces individually, but by seeing the movement of the whole game. This clarity makes you effective in ways that others can't even imagine. You don't get caught in petty conflicts because you understand which fights matter and which are noise. You don't expend energy trying to persuade people who are guided by forces beyond argument. You navigate relationships, organizations, and networks with a precision that appears effortless. That effortless appearance is deceptive because it's rooted in observation, analysis, and understanding. And there's a subtle kind of power in this. While others focus on personalities, gossip, and surface impressions, you're moving through systems with quiet influence. People notice it, even if they can't always name it. They sense someone who understands the real rules, someone who can see the strings behind the puppets. That perception alone changes the way they engage with you. You aren't just participating in the game, they recognize that you're reading the code behind it, and that makes you someone whose presence shifts outcomes, even before a word is spoken. Number 5. You don't compete with us, and that removes tension instantly. Most people enter a room with a mindset of rivalry. They measure themselves against others, looking to outshine, outperform, or assert dominance. Every conversation becomes a subtle contest, every interaction a test of worth. You don't operate that way. You're not trying to climb over anyone or prove your value in comparison. That absence of competition changes everything. It's disarming. It immediately shifts the energy around you because people sense that they are not being challenged or threatened. You exist on a different plane, and that alone makes others relax, even unconsciously. Influential individuals notice this immediately. They've spent years surrounded by competitors, opportunists, and ambitious actors who are constantly testing limits. When someone enters the space without any hint of rivalry, it signals confidence, security, and independence. You are secure enough in yourself to not need to dominate, and that rare form of calm earns respect almost automatically. It's not arrogance, it's presence. Your lack of competitive energy allows people to interact with you without ego-based tension, which is both refreshing and rare in circles where everyone is constantly sizing each other up. You also understand that true influence doesn't come from defeating others. It comes from clarity, insight, and the ability to act with precision when it matters. By not competing, you are free to observe, to assess, and to move strategically. That makes your actions far more effective than those who constantly jockey for position because you are deliberate rather than reactive. There's an almost invisible magnetism in this approach. People instinctively want to include you, consult you, and confide in you because you are not another threat to their ego. They feel safe around you, not in a patronizing way, but because you've demonstrated, without effort, that you are not a player in the usual game of one-upmanship. That freedom from competition gives you a quiet authority that no forced ambition or loud display could ever achieve. In a room full of rivals, your absence of rivalry makes you stand out, not by being louder, but by simply being untouchably steady. Number 6. You are comfortable knowing things you can't explain yet. Most people panic when their intuition outpaces their understanding. They demand clarity before action, proof before trust, answers before questions. You don't. You act on instincts and insights that aren't fully formed, and you're unbothered by the uncertainty that accompanies them. That ability to operate in that gray space, where logic hasn't caught up to perception, is what separates you from the predictable masses. People with real influence notice it immediately, because they've learned that the most profound decisions often emerge before all the evidence is visible. Acting too early or too late can ruin everything, but you move in that tension with calm precision. There's a quiet power in being comfortable with the unknown. You don't have to explain why you chose a certain path, why a thought feels right, or why a moment demands a specific response. Others feel compelled to justify every move because they fear being wrong. You, however, understand that timing, perspective, and subtle cues often matter more than explicit reasoning. That makes your decisions look effortless, even though they're informed by observation, intuition, and a deep understanding of human behavior. This doesn't mean you act recklessly. It means you've developed a sense of internal calibration that allows you to trust your judgment even when it isn't fully verbalized. You let the pieces fall into place afterward. People who can't operate this way often miss patterns that are obvious to someone who has learned patience with ambiguity. You see connections others overlook and make choices that seem preordained in hindsight. Influential observers recognize this immediately. They notice when someone's actions consistently align with outcomes they themselves didn't predict. They respect the person who moves confidently without needing to explain every decision, because that signals depth and competence beyond the superficial. It's rare, and it makes you magnetic. Your comfort with uncertainty doesn't just set you apart. It quietly signals that you belong in spaces where others hesitate, where decisions are complex, and where influence is measured not by words, but by results. Number 7. You don't ask for access, yet doors keep opening for you. Most people chase opportunities. They knock on doors, network relentlessly, and try to convince others they belong in spaces they haven't earned yet. You don't do that. You don't seek validation or permission because you operate from a different kind of credibility, one that doesn't require explanation or pleading. Influence and opportunity are drawn to you, not because you demand them, but because people sense something in you that aligns with their own standards and long-term thinking. That quiet, almost invisible pull is far more powerful than effortful persuasion. People who are truly influential notice the difference immediately. They can tell who is trying to belong and who already has intrinsic alignment with the environment. You don't need introductions or approvals. You move with an air of quiet authority, and others naturally adjust their perception of you to fit that. Invitations, insights, and chances come without you having to chase them, because real influence recognizes its own. You signal value through consistency, clarity, and the way you interact, and those signals are stronger than any resume or boastful claim. What's extraordinary about this is that it completely disarms people. When someone is constantly asking for access, the room measures them, tests them, and sometimes holds back. When you simply exist without solicitation, people instinctively remove those barriers. They want you there, not out of obligation, but because your presence changes the dynamic. You're not another participant. You're a quiet node around which influence naturally flows. Your restraint also communicates self-sufficiency. You aren't desperate, you aren't grasping, and you aren't performing. That security attracts collaboration rather than suspicion. People know that engaging with you is mutually beneficial, not transactional, which is rare in circles where alliances are often temporary or opportunistic. Over time, this behavior compounds. The doors that open early continue to widen. The networks that notice you continue to include you, and the trust you've earned without effort continues to grow. You don't force the world to acknowledge you. It simply does quietly, because you've demonstrated something others can't manufacture. Presence, depth, and reliability. That is the kind of influence that lasts. Number 8. You don't rush outcomes, and that signals long-term thinking. Most people are in a hurry. They want results yesterday, they want recognition immediately, and they panic when progress isn't visible. You don't operate that way. You understand that timing is often more important than effort, and that the true measure of impact isn't speed, it's durability. By not rushing, you demonstrate patience, discipline, and a vision that stretches beyond the immediate. That kind of calm confidence is magnetic to people who have seen too many frantic, short-sighted attempts to win. Those who hold real influence notice this instantly. They see who makes choices for instant gratification and who makes choices for legacy. You belong to the latter category. You act when it matters, not when it's convenient. You understand that some moves need time to settle, some relationships need time to mature, and some ideas need time to grow before they bear fruit. That foresight is rare, and it signals competence beyond performance. People sense that you are in control, not of appearances, but of trajectories. Not rushing also communicates mastery over your own energy. You don't get trapped in unnecessary reactions, overcommit, or expend resources chasing transient opportunities. That restraint makes every action you take carry weight. When you finally decide to move, it isn't impulsive. It's precise, deliberate, and calculated. Your timing amplifies your effectiveness and signals to others that you understand consequences in a way most cannot. There's a quiet authority in this approach. While others are scrambling, you appear unshakable. That presence communicates confidence, intelligence, and security without a single word. People naturally follow or seek guidance from those who seem aligned with outcomes rather than chaos. In circles where influence is currency, the ability to act without hurry is rare. It shows you're not motivated by fear, desire for approval, or ego. You're motivated by clarity, insight, and long-term vision. That perspective makes you stand apart. Your patience isn't passivity, it's strategy. And anyone who recognizes it instinctively respects it, because they know results achieved this way endure far longer than those grabbed in haste. Number 9, you are harder on yourself than anyone else could ever be. Most people measure themselves against others. They worry about perception, comparison, or what people think of their achievements. You don't. Your standard isn't set by external applause or criticism. It's internal, relentless, and often invisible to those around you. You notice your own mistakes before anyone else does, correct them quietly, and rarely broadcast your efforts. That level of self-discipline is rare, and it's precisely what people who matter notice, even if they don't say it aloud. Being harder on yourself doesn't mean punishing or undermining yourself. It means holding a clarity about your own responsibility that others struggle to maintain. You demand consistency, honesty, and excellence from yourself first, and only then can you interact meaningfully with the world. People who constantly seek validation from outside rarely achieve depth, because their behavior is reactive. You, on the other hand, are proactive in shaping your own character, skills, and decisions. That difference is subtle but powerful. It radiates without effort. This self-accountability also makes you trustworthy in ways that others can't easily replicate. People sense that if you've already held yourself to a higher standard, your word, your actions, and your decisions carry weight. They don't have to worry about manipulation, compromise, or inconsistency. That kind of reliability is magnetic to those who operate at high levels of influence. It's also why your growth is exponential. You learn faster, adapt better, and anticipate consequences before they arrive. Mistakes aren't excuses, they're data, analyzed rigorously and used to refine your approach. That self-critique gives you foresight, poise, and control in situations that fluster others. Finally, this intense self-awareness creates an aura of quiet authority. People feel it without being able to name it. They may notice your calmness, precision, or steady judgment, but what they're really observing is someone who has already mastered the inner work that most are still avoiding. That's why trust forms around you naturally, and respect follows automatically, not because you demand it, but because you've proven, time and again, that your own standards surpass what anyone else could ever expect. Number 10, you don't romanticize struggle, but you don't fear it either. Most people treat hardship as a badge of honor or a tragedy to lament. They either glorify it to seem heroic or shrink from it out of fear. You don't fall into either trap. You treat challenges as information, as signals, as necessary steps in a process, not as defining moments of your identity. That perspective sets you apart immediately. People who have been through influence, power, or high-stakes environments notice this because they've spent years observing who collapses under pressure and who simply adjusts and moves forward. Your relationship with struggle is quiet but profound. You don't need validation for surviving difficulty, and you don't overreact when faced with obstacles. You understand that adversity isn't inherently dramatic. It's simply part of the system, something to be navigated intelligently. That calm acceptance communicates competence without boasting, and it signals resilience that people instinctively respect. It's not about looking strong. It's about being strong in a way that doesn't require anyone else to see it. This mindset also makes you highly effective. While others get caught in frustration, resentment, or dramatics, you use difficulties to gather insight. You see weaknesses, patterns, and opportunities that most overlook because they are too busy being emotional about the problem. That allows you to act strategically, make smarter decisions, and emerge from challenges not just unscathed, but ahead. People notice this pattern over time, even if they can't articulate it. They see someone who doesn't panic, someone who doesn't seek sympathy, and someone whose judgment is rarely clouded by temporary discomfort. It's also magnetic. Humans are wired to respect mastery, and mastering adversity without making it a performance is a form of mastery few understand. You don't romanticize the struggle, which makes you appear grounded. You don't fear it, which makes you appear fearless. The combination creates presence, quiet authority, and credibility that draws attention in ways no flashy display could. People with influence instinctively recognize that when you step into the arena, you aren't just surviving, you're already calculating the next move. That makes you unforgettable. Number 11. You notice what people avoid saying, not just what they say. Most people listen only to words. They respond to statements, arguments, and explanations, and rarely consider what is being left unsaid. You operate differently. You read between the lines, pick up on pauses, hesitations, and the subtle shifts in tone that reveal true intentions. You understand that people often communicate more through omission than through speech, and that what isn't said can be far more revealing than what is spoken. That skill sets you apart immediately in any room, because while others are distracted by the surface, you're observing the undercurrents that actually guide behavior. Influential individuals recognize this almost instantly. They've spent years dealing with people who are skilled at managing impressions and masking motives. When they meet someone who notices what others try to hide, they understand that you are operating at a higher level of perception. You see contradictions, unspoken tensions, and gaps between words and actions, and you process them without judgment or panic. That gives you clarity that most people lack, and it makes your interactions measured, precise, and effective. This awareness also gives you a subtle form of authority. People feel it even if they can't explain why. They may try to hide intentions, but you notice the cracks in the facade, the small hesitations, the things they skip over. That doesn't mean you confront them aggressively. It means you adjust, respond, and position yourself strategically. That combination of insight and restraint is magnetic. You also avoid the trap of overanalyzing. You don't force meaning where there is none, but you don't ignore signals either. That balance creates an almost invisible advantage. You understand the room, the players, and the dynamics better than anyone else without anyone realizing how much you see. People with real influence recognize it instinctively. They know that someone who notices what is not said has a map of the territory they themselves may not fully grasp, and that awareness is a rare, quietly commanding form of power. Number 12. You don't need us, and that's why we value you. Most people operate from a place of need. They seek approval, connections, or opportunities because they feel incomplete without them. You don't. You come from a place of sufficiency. You're whole, self-reliant, and clear about your own value, and that independence changes everything. People with influence recognize this immediately. They sense that you aren't negotiating your presence, pandering for acceptance, or bending to fit expectations. That freedom from dependence is magnetic because it signals authenticity, strength, and self-possession, qualities that can't be faked or forced. When you engage with others, it's intentional. Your participation isn't transactional, and it isn't motivated by fear or ambition. You interact because it aligns with your values, judgment, or vision, not because you need something. That rare clarity makes people instinctively respect your presence. It removes tension, insecurities, and power struggles from interactions because they know you aren't there to be influenced or manipulated. You are unshakable, and that steadiness is disarming. In a world where most people operate from a place of lack, this independence also enhances your influence. When you don't need validation or approval, every decision you make carries weight. Your actions aren't compromises. They are choices grounded in insight, strategy, and integrity. People notice when someone doesn't act out of desperation, and that quiet power draws attention and trust. The freedom you exhibit becomes a standard others unconsciously measure themselves against. There's also a paradox in how this plays out socially. The more you need nothing from them, the more people want to give you access. They are drawn to your clarity because it signals that your presence isn't about leverage or obligation. It's about alignment. You are seen as someone whose engagement matters, not because you demand it, but because your choices are deliberate, measured, and principled. Influential observers recognize this immediately. They know that people who are secure in themselves are rare, and rare people are valuable. They respect you not for what you seek, but for the fact that you need nothing from them to be whole, effective, and significant. That independence makes you indispensable without ever trying to be. Number 13, you move as if time is on your side. Most people rush. They hurry through decisions, scramble for recognition, and react to every shift in circumstance as if the clock is their enemy. You don't. You operate with a sense of timing that feels almost unnatural to those around you. Your movements are deliberate, measured and unhurried, as if you know something others don't. That patience is a form of power, and timing is often more valuable than speed. That calm approach to life communicates confidence, mastery and control without a single word. People notice it instinctively, even if they can't explain why. This sense of timing doesn't mean passivity. You're not waiting aimlessly or delaying out of fear. You act when it matters, at the exact moment your presence, insight or decision will have the maximum effect. You understand that premature action can destroy opportunities just as much as inaction can. That ability to sense the right moment makes your interventions precise, effective, and often transformative. Influential people notice that immediately because they understand the difference between someone reacting to events and someone orchestrating outcomes with quiet authority. Your unhurried demeanor also signals control over yourself and your environment. While others panic under pressure, make impulsive choices, or get caught up in chaos, you remain steady. That steadiness is magnetic because it reassures others and commands attention without effort. People naturally follow someone who is confident enough to let the world unfold while remaining aligned with their own trajectory. There's also a psychological effect. When you move as if time is on your side, others perceive you as unshakable, patient, and strategic. They underestimate you at first, but by the time they realize the impact of your timing, the outcome is already decided. That quiet mastery over tempo and sequence creates a form of influence that is subtle yet undeniable. In a world obsessed with rushing and proving, your ability to operate on your own rhythm not only sets you apart, but makes you someone whose presence changes the pace, tone, and ultimately the direction of everything around you. Number 14. You won't belong to us forever, and we know it. Most people operate under the illusion of permanence. They build relationships, alliances, and networks as if every connection will last indefinitely. You don't. There's a sense around you that your presence is valuable but temporary, that you move through spaces not to settle but to impact. That awareness alone makes people pay attention in a way they rarely do. They know that when you leave, or when your focus shifts, the void will be felt, and that creates a subtle form of respect and urgency. People who recognize this instinctively understand your rarity. Your impermanence isn't careless or detached. It's intentional. You engage fully, but on your own terms. You contribute, observe, and influence without becoming entangled in dependency or expectation. That detachment makes your interactions more potent because they are deliberate, measured, and unpressured. People can sense when someone operates with this kind of freedom. It creates a magnetic tension. They want to understand you, include you, and retain your presence, even while knowing they never truly will. This also communicates confidence and self-possession. You're not clinging to any group, individual, or opportunity because you know your value is inherent, not dependent on approval or permanence. That freedom forces others to treat you differently. They listen more carefully, measure their words, and take your presence seriously because it is clear that your involvement is a choice, not a necessity. That choice carries authority. There's a subtle brilliance in this approach. By not belonging fully, you maintain perspective. You observe without being trapped, influence without controlling, and move without attachment. People notice that those who can navigate spaces without being tied down are often the ones who leave the most lasting impact. In circles of real influence, this impermanence is both respected and feared. It signals that you are a force, not a fixture. Your presence is earned, valued, and observed closely. Not because you demand attention, but because you remind everyone around you that the rarest power comes from freedom, mobility, and self-determination. That is why your exit, or even the hint of it, carries weight, and why respect for you is unwavering and instinctive. When you step back and look at the picture as a whole, one thing becomes crystal clear. Being a chosen one isn't about titles, loud achievements, or the applause of the crowd. It's about quiet mastery, deep awareness, and a rare kind of integrity that people with real influence instinctively recognize. It's about moving through the world with confidence in your own timing, understanding power without needing it, noticing what others overlook, and holding yourself to standards no one else could ever enforce. It's about being steady when chaos surrounds you, deliberate when the world rushes, and independent while the masses scramble for validation. These traits aren't performative, they aren't flashy. They are subtle, profound, and enduring. The truth is, influence gravitates toward the consistent, the perceptive, and the unshakably self-possessed. Those who understand this will silently acknowledge your presence, value your insights, and open doors you didn't even knock on. The respect of such people isn't given lightly. It's earned through observation, integrity, and a refusal to bend for convenience. And when you carry these qualities, you don't just stand out. You command attention without trying, influence without speaking, and leave a mark that lasts far beyond the immediate moment. So if you recognize even a fraction of this in yourself, understand that you are already operating on a level few ever reach. You are quietly reshaping the spaces you move through, drawing respect without demand, and leaving an invisible trail of influence behind you. That is the power of the truly chosen. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss insights like this. Smash that like button if you found value. Leave a comment to share your thoughts. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. The journey doesn't end here, it's just beginning. God bless you.